Hello equestrians, I am the Witch of Cavalry and I'm here to read to you the winning stories of the ETG Halloween writing contest. Are you ready for some spookiness? Let's begin, shall we? Deep in the heart of a sprawling countryside, surrounded by dense forests and forgotten trails, there stood an old horse barn with a history as dark as the shadows that clung to its time-worn timbers. Locals spoke of the Whispering Wind's horse barn, a place where horses and riders had vanished without a trace. One crisp autumn evening, Estella, an adventurous equestrian, arrived at the barn, drawn by its eerie reputation. She had heard the unsettling stories of horses whinnying in the dead of night, their cries echoing through the silence, and riders who had entered the barn but were never seen again. With her loyal horse Clyde, Estella entered the barn, its doors groaning in protest. The interior was dimly lit, with flickering lanterns casting eerie shadows on the stalls. As she ventured deeper, she felt an unnatural chill settle in her bones, and a soft, unsettling whispering filled the air. Estella sensed that Clyde was uneasy too, his ears back and eyes darting around nervously. In one corner of the barn, she discovered an old journal with a leather cover that seemed to pulse with a sinister energy. The journal belonged to a rider named Amelia, who had documented her experiences within the Whispering Wind's horse barn. Amelia's journal spoke of a cursed saddle hidden within the barn that granted riders unparalleled skill but came at a grave price. The barn had become a gateway to a sinister realm where the souls of horses and riders were trapped in eternal torment. Determined to uncover the truth, Estella followed Amelia's journal to a hidden cellar beneath the barn. There she found the cursed saddle, adorned with intricate otherworldly symbols. Without fully understanding the consequences, she placed it on Clyde. In an instant, the barn transformed into a nightmarish equestrian arena, with ghostly horses and riders appearing from the shadows. Estella and Clyde were forced into a sinister competition, where each jump and gallop felt like a descent into madness. The souls of the trapped horses and riders watched from the spectral stands, their hollow eyes pleading for release. As the competition reached its terrifying climax, Estella and Clyde faced the malevolent spirit that had cursed the barn. With every ounce of her strength, Estella managed to break free from the saddle's grip, flinging it away. The cursed saddle shattered, and the barn convulsed with a deafening roar. The barn's dark curse was lifted, and the trapped souls were released, their ghostly forms dissolving into the night. Estella and Clyde were left panting and trembling, but they had broken the sinister cycle that had plagued the Whispering Wind's horse barn for generations. The barn, once a place of dread, stood silent and still. Estella and Clyde left, haunted by the horrors they had faced, but determined to ensure that no one would ever be ensnared by the malevolent forces lurking within the cursed horse barn again. Pumpkins and lights mixed with sweet and spooky sounds. Hear the rattling chains from the dungeon below, where no one is meant to go. You remember the story of old, spoken from a time when you were young? The Highlands has always been full of beauty, but alas long with a deep mystery, with a castle that has been locked away for decades. The reason for this remains unknown. Some say the late Duke went mad, others claim the ghosts now own this land. You can hear the sounds of hoofs echoing along the gravel road. You snap back to reality, away from the memories and stories once told, and give your horse a well-deserved pat along their neck. They let out a pleasant snort. Looking out from the top of the hill, you can clearly see the big lake and the castle in the distance. Tonight the ghosts will rule, because Halloween is knocking at the door. The autumn wind is chilly and the leaves in the trees has turned red. The ride has been relaxing so far with your four-legged friend, though the sun has already set and the night was falling upon you. You lean forward in the saddle and switch on the lantern that is hanging in the harness of your horse's front collar. Let's go, Maximus. We should not be out here during this hour. You're not superstitious or anything like that, but after hearing so many stories, myths and legends, during this time of the year, you cannot really help but think about the supernatural beings that might be lurking. You squeeze your legs and let out a clicking sound. Maximus picks up the cue and enters a collected canter, his black mane sweeping along with the wind that is rustling the leaves in the trees. As we enter the forest, his black coat almost seemed to be blended in with the woods. If not for the lantern light, it would be hard to see. You have managed to pass one of the signs, indicating that you are going in the right direction. You ask Maximus to slow down to a trot as you remember that there is a crossroad up ahead. Suddenly he does a full stop and lifts his head and neighs nervously. You almost hit your head into his neck from the sudden motion. "What's the matter, bud?" You look up ahead. A thick fog has started to appear and is moving slowly towards you. "It's all right, pal, just a little fog." You pat him gently and ask him to walk on. He does not seem to be sure at first, but does what he is asked. He has always been a good boy for the 3 years that he has been in your care. The fog has now completely surrounded the two of you. All you can hear is the sound of the hoofs walking along the dirt path, to the wind that is rustling the tree branches, leather from the saddling moving, and a lantern with its rusty ring swinging back and forth. But for some reason it felt you two were not alone. You catch a glimpse of a little light passing by. The fog is heavy, so you cannot see too well. You almost believe that your eyes are deceiving you when you seem to see another horse walking a little further up ahead, and suddenly it was gone, just as fast as it had appeared. "All right, that settles it. No more candy and hot chocolate before a night ride." You start to get worried. Usually you should be home by now, but it almost feels like you are further away from it. You can tell you get a complex look on your face when you hear the sounds of the hoofs shifting from the muddy road to the gravel one. The fog has started to lighten, and what you see when it fades is beyond your comprehension. How did we get here, bud?" You cling onto his mane as you both were now standing in front of the castle gate, with a little light going back and forth outside of it, making a little twinkle sound. It stops its movement when it notices you. You take a hold of the reins and turn around in haste. "We gotta get away from here, bud." You manage to pick up some speed, but Maximus stops and does a light rear. A glow in the shape of a horse is staring into your soul. It feels like you are being judged. Your body freezes from the chills, and the little light that was guarding the gate floats over to the horse-shaped creature. Almost seems like they have a conversation. You feel like you need to speak up. "Hey, I don't know how we got over here, but I promise that we do not wish any harm." The two creatures look back at you. The little light moves towards you and stops right in front of your face and does a little twinkle sound. "No need to be afraid. You seem to respect the land of the dead, human." The voice echoes through your head, and all you could really do was nod in a response and say, I just want us to go home." You give Maximus a reassuring pat. The little light moves away from the two of you, and the horse in the distance is stepping forth, bowing its head down to you. Instinctively, you bow back to them. "You are lucky that you did not come near here alone, human. I will let this slide this time because of your friend." Another voice echoes in your head. You figure it must be the horse. "I won't forget this. I promise. I will be more careful in the future." You scratch Maximus on the neck. You have a feeling the horse meant it is thanks to him that I am still fine. "Run along now. You should have no problem getting home now, human, and in case we meet again, I cannot say what will happen next." You hear the voice as you ask Maximus to walk along. You nod to them to make sure that you understood their words. You can hear the little light twinkling happily behind you. You walk back into the woods. Another fog appears, but this time in an instant you were back on your homestead, like it all had been a dream. Maybe it will turn into a story to tell your family, or a poem that will ring its melody. But one thing you know now for certain: stay clear of the castle at night, especially during autumn times. If a fog appears, make sure to stay clear. Hope you don't see a light that could lead to your demise. You might get to live to see another day, because the castle is truly the ghost's domain. Are you sure you like to go out, lassie? Evening falls quickly this time of the year. The stable manager laid his hand on my shoulder to get my attention. I nodded my head empathetically. I had 5 horses to exercise today, and Evelyn's the last one on the list. If she doesn't get out today, I'm sure she will dance in her stall all night. I patted the side of the flaxen chestnut mare in the cross ties. She looked back at me, her blue eye rolling in its socket. She wasn't the fiercest of my Arabians, but she was far from quiet. Another pat and I turned my attention to the saddle girth. It's All Hallows Eve and the veil between this world and the next is thin. Best be careful out there tonight. The old man left with a wave of his hand and stepped out into the purple light of twilight. I shook my head, not being the superstitious type myself. This was my second trip to the Highlands and none of their folklore had come to life and grabbed me then, so I figured it wouldn't happen now. In the morning the rain had come and replenished the land, but now the breeze raced over the verdant landscape. Evelyn pranced underneath me, invigorated by the fall weather. I kept my hands firm on the reins, keeping her from running off without a good warm-up. Taking her up the trail, I found a great point to look out onto the sea log. The wind carried the scent of salt spray, kelp and the unknown creatures of the deep. A quick glance down the trail and I thought I saw another rider. I frowned, knowing that should be impossible, unless someone had come looking for me. I turned Evelyn to face the rider, preparing to wave them down. Something was wrong, however. Evelyn started snorting and blowing, trying to back away from the rider approaching us. Confused by her antics and busied with trying to calm her down, I didn't look up until it was almost on top of us. When I did, my blood ran cold. It stood about 6 or 7 feet tall, dwarfing my dainty Arabian mare. The creature lacked any kind of skin across his entire body. Out of his mouth poured a foul-smelling and nauseating vapor that choked me and made my eyes tear up. In its horse-like skull was a single large red eye directly in the center of its forehead, whose gaze held me frozen to the spot. I had never felt such malice directed towards me in my life. Looking beyond the shoulder of the horse-like monster, I saw the rider, if it could even be called that, whose long arms dragged on the ground and its dead eyes locked onto me. Staring at it, I began to realize the wrongness of the creature. The rider wasn't truly a rider at all, as the torso blended seamlessly into the horse's back. It began to reach towards us, and Evelyn could take no more. She reared, screamed, and bolted down the trail like a shot into the night. I barely managed to keep my seat and hung on for dear life, for the chase had begun. A hollow roar rang out into the night as the creature ran behind us. Clearly mad, it had missed an easy meal. It was not going to let us go so easily. Heart hammering in my chest, I leaned low over Evelyn's neck and urged her on. Her eyes showed the whites all around the edges. I vaguely worried about running her at such a reckless pace, but I couldn't have slowed her down even if I wanted to. No matter how fast we ran, it was directly behind us, showing no strain or fatigue. Occasionally it came close enough to us that the long arms and hands would reach towards me to grasp at me and pull me off my horse. The stench of its breath was overpowering when it was so close. In a burst of fresh terror, Evelyn would find a little more speed and pull away just out of its reach again. She was beginning to tire at this pace, and I knew eventually she wouldn't be able to pull away from the monster on her heels. I closed my eyes and hoped we would somehow be able to escape the gruesome fate awaiting us. We weren't very far from the stables at that point. The faint glow of the lights was a beacon of safe haven in the dark. Maybe, I thought, if we could get back into the stable yard, someone would be there. Someone could save us. Though what anyone could do against the monster that was pursuing us, I didn't know. A small trickling stream was all that lay between us and the stable yard. With one final Herculean effort, I sent Evelyn flying across it. With a heavy thud, her feet landed on the far bank, and after a few strides, I realized I only heard one set of hoofbeats. I pulled Evelyn to a stop, completely surprised. Looking back, the monster was pacing back and forth on the other side of the stream. Grumbling and growling, it made an attempt to ford the stream, only for it to pull back in pain as the fresh water burned and steamed on its flesh, as if the water had turned boiling hot. Evelyn's sides heaved, her hot breath turning white in the growing chill. Her eyes still rolled and showed their whites, as she shook her head in fear at the creature staring at us across the stream. I wasn't sure why it couldn't cross, I only knew that it seemed at the time it couldn't. I turned Evelyn towards the stables, her head hanging low as she walked. Frothy sweat poured off Evelyn as she stood in her stall. She was still afraid, as were all the other horses in the stable, because now they could hear the strange sounds of the monster on the other side of the stream. I did my best to scrub her down, then slumped against the wall, slowly sliding down to sit in the straw. I couldn't come to terms with what just happened. It defied everything I thought I knew. I didn't believe in the old legends and the folklore, and I wasn't ever afraid of the boogeyman. Now I did believe. Now I knew to be afraid. Coins have been sent to the authors of these stories. Now, which one of these stories did you find most haunting? I wish you a happy Halloween, and remember, be careful out there, because you never know which horrors might fall upon you. Bye!